Let me ask you this. This is just getting to questions now. One anonymous listener asked this the specific question I'm going to ask, but a number of people have asked around this. From my perspective, what happens in a 2024 election is another thing, but you have all sorts of chaos that could happen over the next 2 years with divided government. But the debt limit thing is sui generis. That is the one thing where it's not just theater and nonsense and standoffs and whatever. You can have a true global crisis. And from where I sit, I think it seems like a Republican House at least wants to do something like, repeal all the stuff you passed in the first 2 years, or no debt limit, or do these cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And I think there is zero appetite to play ball on either one of those among Democrats, A. And I think the House Republican caucus is ready to shoot that hostage and actually default on the federal debt. So my question are Democrats going to be able to do what I think is essential, which is to remove that cudgel from their hands in a lame duck session? So Adam, you're saying no. You just don't think so.
I highly doubt it. It's one of those, because already I think, because look, you need all 50 Democrats to vote to do it, and you'd have to do it. I guess you could use one of the remaining reconciliation vehicles to do it, so you wouldn't have to reform the filibuster to do it. Mm-hmm. But I think that one of the problems is that there's probably enough Democrats in the caucus who, first of all, there's not the immediate threat. There's absolutely always a collective action problem on these things, and people will not act on the crisis until the crisis is upon them. And so the fact that there's no immediate crisis makes it very hard to get the 50 votes to do it. In addition, I think there's probably at least a handful of Democrats who, I don't want to say are looking forward to this crisis, because that's not exactly what I mean. What I mean is I think that they see an opportunity for a negotiation to occur, and that on issues that they care about, like reducing the debt, making some changes to Medicare and Social Security, and from sort of a vanity perspective, like being part of a grand bargain. And I think that those two factors will mean that you're not going to be able to get 50 votes to do it in a lame duck. I would very much like to be wrong about this. And you never know. Lame ducks, a lot of stuff happens in lame ducks. And sometimes the sort of bucket energy of losing a majority perhaps makes you just say, we're just going to do this and let's just do this and be legends kind of energy. We had a very productive lame duck in 2010 after Democrats had a very bad midterm. We passed On Last Don't Tell, we passed the START treaty, we passed a bunch of other things because there was that sort of, let's be legends energy. So you never know. But if I had to make a prediction, I would say they are not going to get rid of the debt limit or otherwise resolve this preemptively in the lame duck.
Well, let me Joey asks, and this is sort of on a sort of a specific funny thing, but I think there's a broader question. He says, which is harder, lame duck stealing, defanging in Congress now, or the $1 trillion platinum coin forging by Biden? The whole platinum coin thing. But setting aside the platinum coin, do we think there is going to be some kind of extraordinary action from the executive branch that does something that prevents
it's going to be
crisis?
NDAA and permitting reform. It's going to be the
Say it again?
It's going to be the National Defense Authorization Act, and they're going to use that as a vehicle for a number of things, including permitting reform, and that's going to suck all the oxygen away from everything else.
In lame duck, you mean?
What's that? Yeah,
you mean that's going to be the lame duck agenda?
Yeah.
I agree with Steve that's what they're going to focus on. But and to the question, I don't think you'll see. Look, Biden's been interesting. I mean, there have been some things that I think I think as a sort of deep institutionalist, he's probably about the least likely person to do something like minting the coin or the 14th Amendment option. And so I think the answer is almost certainly no. I would just say, if you're trying to, look for glimmers of hope, I think Biden's institutionalism in some ways, when he's pushed to see that the other side is being so unreasonable and unreasonable in a way that he's never witnessed in his nearly 40 years in national politics, maybe that opens up some other possibilities, because he has confidence that if there was any rational way, he would be able to achieve a compromise, and that Republicans are being so unreasonable that maybe extraordinary measures are necessary, combined with he'll have, all of the titans of finance, calling him and begging him to do something to prevent this outcome. Who knows? I certainly would not bet on it. But
I'll be honest with you. I would have thought there would be, if for anybody who is looking with anything remotely like 2020 vision to what we're looking at over the course of the next year, I would think there would be a big push from the big banks to settle this now while there's still some ability to settle it. I thought, Adam, that you were going to say earlier that some of them want to do it because they think it'll be good for the Democrats, right? That it'll be kind of like something like what the first government shutdowns were like in 1995. Very bad, but kind of completely discredited the Republicans. And frankly, I think that's possible, but the collateral damage will be so profound as to make that kind of just small, kind of small beer for even the most
right.
Over the top Democratic partisan.
It's just not how senators think. I mean, it's they there again, there's a vanity aspect to it, whereas they sort of feel like, first of all, I think the stakes are so high that I think that a lot of them are probably going to come down on the side of, okay, maybe when all of the dust settles, we come out on the winning end politically, but we're not willing, because there will be very real and very severe consequences for a lot of people. And I think admirably, a lot of senators will say, the political upside is not worth the suffering that will result from this. And I think that's a very defensible and reasonable stance. But there's also a funny aspect of sort of senator brain of like, they just think that they are the ones associated with a sort of embarrassing outcome. And this happened in 2013. There was at the time the second longest government shutdown when I was working for Senator Reid. And as sort of a political animal, I was thrilled because Republicans were just getting the absolute crap beat out of them every day, and their polls were tanking, and it was covering up the story of the horrible rollout of the Obamacare website that was happening at the same time. And I was like, this is great, it's all upside for us politically. And I sort of expected to see that reflected in senators thinking, they too were political creatures. But what you saw instead was a lot of them just sort of hangdog moping, like, they were getting all the coverage was Washington dysfunction, and they felt they were a part of that, and they just felt sort of embarrassed that they were a part of this dysfunctional government. So I think there's an element of that here too, where they just, they fundamentally want to be seen as being solution oriented and getting things done. And anytime there's coverage of Washington dysfunction or a nuclear dysfunction that has this massive set of consequences, they, at least on the Democratic side, they feel embarrassed by it and want to sort of find a solution that gets them out of that situation.
I would think, being the Congress that saw the United States default on its debt obligations for the first time in a quarter millennium, would be that would sound pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, it's very, no, but what I mean is that's why I think they're more likely to like capitulate at the last minute than to actually let it go over the cliff.
And capitulate, have some sort of big like Social Security retrenchment.
This is my big fear is that Republicans are so clear that they're willing to go over the cliff. And I think that will be true, that Democrats, cave on a massive set of spending cuts, including the Medicare and Social Security, out of sort of a desire to be seen as the reasonable ones and to not push the country into a crisis. And there's, look, there will be people saying the consequences of reaching the debt ceiling are so severe that you should be willing to give up a lot in order to avoid it. And it's
happening with what Adam is saying is that one party is willing to be the crazy Ivan and the others want those one having to be put in the box of being rational. And I think that is a real problem because the rational act and player in this doesn't get credit for that rationality in the end.
Right. Right. And then Democrats get no credit for the deal. Republicans take credit for this grand bargain that slashes Social Security. Democratic constituents are hurt by the consequences. And then we also have this sense that Washington is working, just enough while we continue to erode our guardrails. This is my nightmare scenario for the next 2 years.
I guess I will just, and we'll conclude on this, that I am, I suspect that both of you are right because the people, and it shocks me that you're right, but I know both of you, so I think you are right. But I will say this, I think that will set off a nuclear detonation within the Democratic Party nationwide if that happens. And to some people maybe that's a good thing, right? I mean, but I do. People remember what happened in 2011. They remember a whole series of things. And I do, when I said before about the platinum coin, my thought, my fear has always been the whole thing about the full faith and credit is it's the full faith and credit. If you start saying, well, we can't really do it, but I'm going to mint this coin, or someone said the 14th Amendment meant I can just do it, there's going to be, then you have debt obligations that have a big question mark over it. There's the old debt obligations that were kind of constitutional. And now there's this new one that some people say is constitutional. So even solving it in that way doesn't really solve it. Now, it could be that the international kind of economic system looks at this and just says, I don't see it. Of course, the US is always going to, make good on its debt obligations. It's possible because I'm not quite sure what anybody knows to do